Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
Gale Banks. Gale Banks.
To call Gale Banks an engineer would be an understatement.
This is Speed School with Gale Banks.
School has begun.
Hey, welcome to another episode, guys. I've got a special treat today. I've got Rick Young in the studio. Rick was going to San Gabriel High School and came in my back door at the old speed shop in San Gabriel around 1980 looking for a job. Needless to say, I hired him. I didn't know what he could do. It was just his personality. It was like, wait a minute, this is a special guy. Here we are, 42 years later. We've been dear friends for 42 years. Our turbo adventures started in the late 60s, and we did wild-ass marine engines, offshore boats, river race boats, fuel hydroplanes, all kinds of circle race boats of every type. And most all of it was turbocharged through the 70s with liquid-coupled charge air coolers. We did it right. So Rick comes in, and we start doing cars. We were bringing what was in the boats into the cars, literally, even the liquid-coupled intercooling. It was the heyday of what we did with cars through the 80s. Hot Rod Magazine chronicled most all of it and even predicted the fact that we'd be banned from Top Fuel and Funny Car, and I think we still are. We went screaming ass fast. I didn't recognize how fast we were compared to foreign cars like Porsches and Ferraris and what have you. We were 50 miles an hour faster than those guys, and I didn't realize. It just never registered on me until when I did one with Chubachera, who was the technical editor at Car and Driver in those years. And he really acquainted me with what we actually had done and where we stood in the world out of a speed shop in San Gabriel and then up here in Azusa. So Rick came in when we were in San Gabriel. So welcome, Rick.
Oh, thanks, Gale. Excited to be here. And, as Gale said, I went to work for him when I was 16 years old. We were in high school auto shop at San Gabriel High. And one of the guys came in one day very excited to say he'd gotten the job at Banks. And we were like, what? We couldn't believe it. Because working at Banks, that'd be like working at Disneyland. Like, this is beyond our comprehension. Because, we're gearheads and we hot rod our cars. And, we did the best we can with the no money that we had. So I thought to myself, wait a second, if this guy can get a job there, I'm going over there immediately. So I went that afternoon and I thought, I have to have a plan. I have to have something to offer. So I knew that Gale was very big in the marine industry. So I went in the front office. I said, yes, I'd like to apply for a job. Well, what is it you do? Well, I'm a electrical specialist. I can do wiring on boats, and I know he builds these boats, and I can do the wiring. Well, we don't really need anybody here. Just fill out an application. And I said, yes, but is Gale here? I want to talk to him. Well, you have to make an appointment. And, I said, well, okay. So I filled out the application. I didn't realize that he was sitting one door away in his office. And he said, hey, come in here. So I went in and saw him. I'd never met him before. I said, I want to wire boats. I want to work for you, and I want to do electrical work. And we had that discussion. He goes, you know what? I don't need anyone to wire boats, but you know what I need? I need a parts truck driver. And I said, I'm your guy. So I became the parts truck driver, and kind of the rest is history, you might say. I have quite.
You might have wired a few boats too.
Oh yes, so we did plenty of electrical work. But I started as a parts truck driver with great excitement, and it was really something to see because I believe at the time I was the 12th employee at that location. So we were small, and it was really amazing to see the things that we would do. To see them like dyno the Bonneville engine, which is basically facing into the street. The dyno was just like some big barn doors that opened. And so you have this, over 1,000 horsepower engine running with this 5 or 6 inch exhaust on it.
Yeah.
And we would light that engine up. It was so loud that the police would come. They would stand there in the street just in awe. So to see, the company go from where we were, which was very successful, to just over the top, is really quite something. So I thought of a few things to talk about today. And I thought about some just interesting milestones and things that I personally witnessed and was part of that was really, really fun stuff. So in the early 80s, probably about 1982, Gale went to Detroit to GM on a mission. He basically was just trying to forge a relationship with GM so we could, do some project cars, this and that. To our astounding surprise, he came back from Detroit with 2 brand new cars, which were the F-body cars. So this was a Camaro and a Firebird. Now you have to realize no one had ever even seen these cars before. And he comes back with them, and they shipped them out on a semi, and we unloaded them in the street, and we have an iconic picture somewhere of us standing around these 2 cars. I remember the Camaro it was a white Camaro, and it had kind of a burnt orange and red motif to it, like stripes on it.
Yeah.
And then the Trans Am was also white, and it had like a blue motif stripes on it. These cars were so spectacular. No one having seen them, people were stopping in the street like, what is this? They couldn't believe their eyes,
Yeah.
So that was
I think they were pre-production or engineering cars.
Yes. These cars were not on the street yet. We'd never even seen a photo of one. And
And
you brought them back.
What he's talking about is the 82 F-body. They were quite streamlined, especially the Firebird.
Us being Gale Banks Engineering, we have to attack these cars with great vigor. And we came up with quite a few different scenarios for these cars. And they evolved into 2 particular cars that I want to talk about. One is, I'll call it the blue car. Now, this was a stock Trans Am when we got it. In fact, I call this the ultimate sleeper car because it was the most vanilla, plain Trans Am you could buy. I mean, it looked like a rental car. There was just nothing. It wasn't, all aero kits and, fancy stuff. It was a really vanilla car. What amazed me is we took that car and gutted it and completely rebuilt it into a supercar, the likes of which, it still stands up to this day.
Absolutely.
The result was amazing. So we had a client in South Africa, and we were kind of leery about this. Like, this guy wants to, throw down for this car, and he wants the fastest car in the world. That was the goal. And of course, Gale being Gale, like that didn't go unnoticed.
He was already had the fastest car in South Africa, which was a German Capri with one of my 350. It was a road race engine, basically, twin turboed, small block. So we already had a relationship when he ordered the Firebird.
Yes, so this guy is a very well-to-do person and quite a car head. Like, to this day, he has a collection. He probably has 250 cars, which include Ferraris, Porsche, McLaren F1, this blue car, amongst others, and big fan of, Mercedes. The goal with this car was to keep it a vanilla car. It was the ultimate sleeper car because under the stock hood of this car was a big block Chevy, and I believe it was 430 inches. It was a short stroke engine.
Yeah, it was a 427, my favorite number, just dusted out a little, straighten up the bores. I think it was 20 over or 10, very slight overbore. That was it. So it was a 430.
So stuffed under the hood of this car is this big block, which doesn't seem possible to put a big block in this car. Not only that, it's a big block. It has dual quads. It has these massive Holley carburetors. I mean, it was just unbelievable to see. In fact, one of the things that was really quite something was the throttle linkage to make all this work. It was really a work of art. So massive dual quads. It had a water-to-air intercooler, which is unheard of in a road car. Because remember, this is a street car that had air conditioning, power steering, stereo, all this kind of stuff. And in addition to the dual quads, the water-to-air intercooler, it had these massive turbos on it. And I was a young person, like I'd seen turbos being around Gale, but even I could tell like, okay, there's something special about these. These things are huge.
Yeah.
So that was really something to see it all stuffed under the hood. The hood would close and the car idled nice. It didn't overheat. It also had a Doug Nash 5-speed transmission, and it had, I believe, a lot of Lamb suspension components on it.
Yeah.
If I'm right.
Yeah.
And it had centerline rims, which back in the day, this was big news, man. These were very, very expensive rims. And, it gave the car a look that was really, it was kind of surprising because you see this vanilla car with these flashy rims on it. Like, man, what's up with that? As the car was built, I was fortunate enough to be able to meet the client. He came over here because he wanted to see the car. Now, remember, a trip from South Africa back then was a major journey. So he came over and I met him and showed him the car, showed him the shop. We went to dinner with Gale and, had a nice day. And as I took him back to the hotel that night, he said to me, Rick, when the car's done, I want you to come with the car. You come with the car. And, I want you to come to South Africa and be my guest. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, sure.
Yeah.
I didn't think much about it. Well, sure enough, when the car was finished, he sent me a ticket. And I remember the price of that ticket was $3,000. And that was back in the early 80s. And it was quite a journey. Because of the war in Angola and this kind of stuff, South African Airlines could not fly over the continent of Africa. So for me to go, I had to go from LAX, JFK to Cabo Verde Islands off Portugal to Johannesburg, which was a 30-hour trip. It was quite something. Yeah, it was really something.
Now, you had put the car on a freighter.
Yes, we shipped the car. In fact, it was Imperial Palace Casino at the time had a massive collection of cars.
Yeah.
So they were used to transporting exotic cars. So the big Imperial Palace semi showed up here and gingerly loaded this thing on. In fact, I had also gotten Peter or the client some spares. I got him a spare windshield and a spare hood. And I asked the truck driver, can you take this with the car? He goes, no, I can't. I can't take extra freight. So I whip out a $100 bill. I'm like, can you take it now? He's like, absolutely. So that got delivered down there. But I got called by the shipping company. It went out of Savannah, Georgia. I got called by the shipping company. What's in this crate? I go, well, there's a windshield and there's a hood for a car. Well, we can't ship a windshield. We can't be liable. Okay, there's no windshield. It's just the car hood. Okay.
Yeah.
So they sent it. So I take my 30-hour trip to South Africa. And by the way, I have to tell you this. I was a young person. When I went to South Africa, I was 23 years old. And when the subject of this guy from South Africa came up, I literally had never heard of the country of South Africa. This is before the apartheid issue and South Africa became a big story in the news. I had never heard of the country of South Africa. I literally had to get the globe out. I'm like, oh, what do you know? There is a country called South Africa. So next thing you know, I'm there. And they had not driven the car. They got it. It took us, I think, 6 weeks to get there. And when the car arrived, they were afraid to drive it. So they parked it and waited for me to arrive. And so, all right, let's go. So I got in, put the key in, started right up, just like any car. And we drove it around town with the client and some friends in the back seat, just kind of cruising and this and that.
Were you driving?
Yes, I was driving. They didn't want to drive it because they weren't familiar with it.
Gotcha.
Plus, they're used to right-hand drive cars, by the way.
Oh, yes.
So
that's another, yeah.
Yeah, so this is it's very foreign to them.
Yes.
So we drove it around town and goosed it a couple times, which was just staggering. And I told them, I go, man, you need to put better gas in this car because they had fueled it.
Yeah.
They go, what do you mean? I go, well, it's detonating. Well, how can you tell? I'm like, well, I can hear it, and I watch Gale tune engines and been around this enough. I could clearly hear this is detonating. I go, we can't drive this thing hard with this gas.
Yeah.
So we got some good gas, which we got at the airport, and we put it in. And I took me driving and the client in the passenger seat and one of his friends in the back seat. And we went on a 4-lane highway during the middle of the day. It's probably 2:00 in the afternoon their time. And 4-lane highway straight for as far as you can see, miles and miles of straight, level, even road.
Yeah.
Not a car to be seen.
Oh, my God. That's it. I have that dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to realize the power of this car. It is truly staggering. Just to back up for a second, when it was here and we would drive around and test it, I would get on the northbound 605 and you have to realize it had a 2.29 rear axle. So this car is geared to go over 200 miles an hour. So I could get on the 605 freeway in second gear at about 70 miles an hour, step on it. Now, this car wouldn't just like squeak the tires. It would burn rubber. And I mean, for real, it would burn rubber and leave stripes on the freeway at 70, 80 miles an hour. So back to my test with the client. So we're on this road in South Africa. You know, I get into this thing and, you know, I'm legging it pretty good and we're accelerating hard. I get it into about fourth and fifth gear. Fourth gear, I really stood on it. They're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the speedo. I shift into fifth gear. I see the speedo hit 185 and I'm like, right on, we're going to go 200. That was my goal.
Yeah.
We're within 1.5 seconds of 200 miles an hour. These guys are freaking out. Rick, stop, slow down, slow down, slow down. They were just scared to death because, you know, when you're not driving, the sensation of speed is intensified. And I was so disappointed that I didn't get to go 200. And I never have actually driven 200 to this day. But we were at 185 and pulling hard. I mean, the power of the car and the acceleration was unreal. For example, you could get this car in third gear at about 100 miles an hour and stand on it, and it's like a bus hit you in the back. The acceleration, it would just crush you into the seats. It was unreal, but it was so steady and true, and there was no weird vibrations, and it handled good, and there was no feeling of, you know, it ran so good, it's like it didn't matter. It would just go and go and go. So eventually this car set the South African land speed record. I think the first record was 238 miles per hour. And
now this is at 4,000, oh no.
6,000
feet of
Johannesburg,
altitude.
yeah.
This is higher than Bonneville. No air density. Thin air.
So it sets it at 238 miles an hour. And I believe Willie Hepburn was driving it. Who was a race car driver down there and quite a character. And he told me there's more. He goes, this car will go faster than this. So I remember they rented a helicopter and flew back and got more supplies and goodies and then ran it again. I believe it went 242 or maybe 244 ultimately.
I think ultimately, I searched it online 10 years ago. 406 kilometers per hour was the maximum it achieved, which is about 252.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
he wanted 240.
Yeah.
You know.
And by the way, after all that, drove the car home on the highway. So
yeah,
that's an amazing story. And, you know, I could see it like it's yesterday. It's like the video in my head. I wish I could like publish it and show you, because to be able to drive a car that's not, you know, just barely making 185. I'm talking 185 and pulling hard. Like there was way more. I assure you, we could have gone well over 200.
Yes. I think the horsepower was around 1,400.
Yeah, I would believe that.
You know, ultimately we couldn't dyno it. The dyno would not handle the engine. So we built an onboard dyno called the Banks Dynafact. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And we even used it to measure the braking horsepower of our exhaust brakes back then that we did for the diesel engines. The Bonneville engine, we did a race version of that car. Pontiac gave us another car and a budget. And I think the fastest we ever went at Bonneville, the back door speed trap was 283, 277 for a full mile. But out the back door, we were still accelerating in the mile. That's how we got the 283 back door.
You need to realize that when we speak of this 1,400 horsepower engine, this is an engine that idled nice. It really wasn't that loud. I mean, you could easily drive this around town. It had air conditioning and power steering, and it was just like a regular car. I mean, it was really an achievement, because you would think, you know, to get 1,400 horsepower into a car, the car would just be, you know, like cobbled together and barely run and this kind of thing. Is definitely not the case. I mean, it was really amazing. And it was great fun to challenge people on the freeway. You know, again, I'd be out driving this car and...
Now it's coming out.
Yes.
I've never heard this. Go ahead.
But you know how animals have that urge to chase? I would be on the freeway and I would pray to find somebody in a Porsche or a Ferrari and just ruin their day. And, you know, I had that opportunity more than once. And even guys are like, pull over. Like, what the heck is going on here? Mm-hmm. Like, and I remember the one guy in the Porsche asked me, is that car turbocharged? Like, yes, it is. So that's the story of the blue car. And the next car I want to talk about is what we call the red car. So the red car was a project with Car and Driver magazine. And Gale, you got to chime in and say, I don't know how this challenge came about or how we got into the mode of building this car.
Well, here's how that happened. Chubba at Car and Driver had heard that we were doing these fast cars. So he calls up, can I go for a ride in one of them? Well, we were working on a small block twin turbo for a client in Detroit area. So we went out in that car. And it wasn't geared for 200 or any of that. It was geared for about $170. And took it on the Laguna Freeway, and Chubba almost killed us both. He didn't leave enough room. You know, we kind of stopped, let the semis and everything go down. We found about a mile of vacant highway, and he legged it, and we reeled those guys in real quick. Then there was nowhere to go, and he damn near. Actually, Chubba's skill as a driver was what saved us, because the brakes were stock, and they were soon toast. So that's how that led up to the Red Car project.
So I know you've heard about the Red Car and the Car and Driver project, but I want to tell you my perspective on this. So again, I'm a young person. I love cars. I love working for Gale. You know, it's like working in Candyland every day for us, you know, to see these beautiful parts that are made and everything. So we get the Red Car, and the first thing that impressed me is Gale had it painted, and it wasn't just painted, it was painted by the guys that paint the Ferraris. And I remember at the time, the paint job for this Trans Am cost $5,000. And back then, we're like, what? You got to be kidding me.
This was a clapped out magazine car that Pontiac contributed.
So it came.
That's why I painted it.
But you didn't just paint it.
No.
It was literally a work of art, to the point we were afraid to even touch it. It was so beautiful. The paint looked like it was wet. It was so glossy, and it's just unreal. And of course, it had the classic twin turbo Banks engine, very beautifully built and finished. It was really something to see. You know, one of the problems we had early on with these cars is Gale would put these, very high horsepower engines in them. And we realized we need a better drivetrain. So we had, very expensive transmissions. And we found the best solution was to use a Ford 9-inch rear end that was shortened. And this was very common for hot rodders back in the day. The problem we had is we'd take these cars out and stand on them hard, and it would literally rip the gears out of the rear end. They would come right out the front. It would just break the pumpkin. And they were, at the time, like, I was like, man, what do we do? There is no better rear end that fits. So Gale re-engineered the housing of this thing and put this massive piece of steel around it, and that solved the problem. Because we were to the point where every time you would step on the car, it would break the rear end. Like, well, this isn't going to work. So finally, that was resolved. And it just shows you the amount of torque and horsepower these engines had, and that you could put it down to the ground, because these tires would hook up and it would take the power, but the rear end was the failure point, which is astounding. And I doubt you've heard many instances of Ford 9-inches breaking. So this is the double rib Ford 9-inch. It was the good truck kind. So
what I did was I made a girdle that prevented the breakage that he's talking about. And that girdle also attached that torque arm. We didn't have any finite element analysis. It was very over-engineered, but it solved the problem. Just added a few pounds of unsprung weight. If it was a road race car, you'd be losing your cookies over that.
But for our sake, problem solved.
Yeah.
Never had the problem again.
That was it.
So we do this test with Car and Driver, which you've heard about. And we knew the car was going to go over 200. There's no question about that. In fact, I remember with Gale driving and me in the passenger seat, we went 190. And, these speeds are staggering. I mean, these are big numbers, especially, in street cars. I remember seeing...
Well, especially when the fastest street cars were foreign cars, and they were like 155, 158.
So I remember looking out the passenger window at the phone poles that were passing, and it's like a picket fence. And I remember looking over at the speedo, I'm like, and I thought he was going to go 200. I'm like, I've been cheated. I've somehow evaded this 200 mark my whole life. Now that I'm older, I'm not so inclined to do this. But, I thought we would hit 200 that day. But he said, I don't like how the engine sounds. Something's not right. So we're going to take it back and we're going to come out another day. So I got to drive the car back. Now, this part of the story you may not have heard, but Gale and Chubba were in a Porsche 928S following me. And I'm coming back westbound on I-40, and I'm coming up this grade, and it was a pretty steep grade, and I was probably a mile ahead of them, but I knew they could see me. Well, what do you know? Here comes a Ferrari up next to me, and again, that urge to chase. Now, Gale already told me the motor's not right, and you know what? Just drive it home easy. I couldn't help myself. This Ferrari came up next to me, and I laid into it. And I dusted this guy, going uphill. And, I'm quite proud of myself because, this guy was like hundreds of yards behind me. Well, we get back to the shop here and Gale's pissed.
You think?
Oh, man. He was not happy with me. And he told me, I told you the motor's not right. What are you doing? You're risking everything and this and that. And he yelled at me a lot. And that was that. But Chubba told me, he's like, that was awesome. He goes, you smoked that guy. We could so clearly see you because you were going uphill, so that...
That'd be Chubba.
Yeah, no doubt.
That would be Chubba right there.
Yep. So that car eventually did go 204 miles an hour and was the fastest street-driven car in the world.
It was a sensation here to go that fast. But in Europe, we made the covers of various magazines, car-type magazines in Europe, Australia, various places. One out of Spain, the headline was "Faster than a Formula One." What's the headline?
I remember.
On the cover of the magazine. Yeah, I went, really? We are? My God!
Yep.
Through my career, I never think about how far ahead we were. I never have thought about that. Being a futurist, what we were doing right then was state of the art to us. It was like we just compared how quick, how fast to ourselves. So now we're reflecting on it.
Yep.
And doing these podcasts, and it's...
Oh, there's lots more stories to talk about.
It was damn cool. Not as cool. We didn't recognize what we were doing against the background of the rest of the world. So you don't know how proud I feel of this, even though you're telling a story. I want to kill you right now, but but I won't because I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this too damn much. No. You didn't hurt the engine any more than
it wasn't really hurt. It just didn't sound right. And you said, you know what? I want to see what's wrong. And you told me.
Did I tell you about the $1,000 ride? Back then, 40 years ago, I came up with this term, $1,000 ride. And what that meant was I'd tell my kids, my wife, if something in one of our hot rods, if something isn't right, you're on the freeway and you're 10 miles from home, don't drive it home. Pull it over and get somebody to tow you. Even though your time schedule might be affected for that day, don't take the $1,000 ride by driving it home and gutting the engine, Today it would be the $10,000 ride. Well, what I'm saying.
That being said, you have to couple that with what I said before, the urge to chase. And I'm not kidding about this. Us people that like to race.
Yeah.
I got a Ferrari next to me and I have the fastest car in the world. I can't help it. I couldn't help myself.
I know. I got it.
It's like a sickness. Anyway, it wasn't that bad. I got barked at, but we survived it. And he was also offset again by Chubba telling me how awesome it was.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about just quickly is like, who is this guy? Who is Gale? And, from my perspective, again, I started when I was 16 years old. And don't forget, I'm the parts truck driver. So in my mind, I'm effectively nobody. But, Gale always made me feel special. He always had time for, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How's your family? How's your mom? This and that. And it's funny because even though being the parts truck driver, we're a small company. So there's a lot of, cross work being done. You know, and I got
Yeah.
involved in lots of stuff, and I eventually I did all kinds of projects with Gale. You know, in the early days, there was no computers. There was no video. There was, this stuff was all done on drafting boards and with calculators and slide rules and this kind of stuff. And it's funny, the one thing that I noticed early is, Gale is the consummate professional. He's obviously very intelligent, but in addition to that, he had this vision and this passion for this stuff that is unrivaled. When we knew, like when we took on a project, we knew we were going to win. It's not like, well, maybe we'll set this record or maybe we'll just, no, we already knew we're going to win. It was funny for us young guys because we would see Gale, he had this pristine white lab coat he would wear. And we thought it was funny because we knew him and we're like, what are you doing? Oh, look at Dr. Banks, He would put that on. But I realized later it's because that was the role. That was the part. He was that consummate professional. And I remember him sitting at the drafting board and I'd watch him write the lines on the paper. Next thing you know, we're having castings made and kits built and this kind of stuff. It was really something to be in that environment with somebody that was so driven and that we knew we weren't going to fail. It was an amazing situation to be in. The other thing that may not come out in these podcasts, Gale has an incredible sense of humor. I have never laughed, and I'm not exaggerating, I have never laughed harder with any human being in my entire life than I have with this guy. We have this rapport, which I don't know where it comes from, and we could just look at each other and start cracking up,
Right now.
It's just amazing. Oh, man, I could tell you 50 stories about this. But now I want to talk about something else. Again, in the early days, we used to build boat engines, in a big way. Big turbocharged boat engines, very successful, very awesome. But another thing about Gale is he has this way of finding this fit. And what I'm going to talk about is the first 6.2 liter diesel turbo kit. What's interesting about this is Gale gets it in his head that we need to do this. And my first reaction was like, why are we hot rodding diesels? And like, where's the customer for this? I just I didn't really see that fit. I didn't feel it because I want to hot rod cars. Come on. We want to burn rubber and do that kind of stuff. So he decides that, we're going to design this 6.2 turbo kit, which we did. And again, from drafting paper to castings to kit to assembly manual, like when you got the instruction manual with this kit, it was like a work of art. I mean, it was amazing. Not only did this kit work good, it came with everything you needed, every nut and bolt, all the instructions, everything fit well. And the other thing, I would even think to myself like, well, this is such overkill. This is a diesel engine. Why does that, it's all like beautiful, like hot rod parts. And I just thought that was unusual. Like, why isn't it just black and we bolt it on there, And he also, knowing how to find that fit with people, he knew what people wanted. This is something, just like the urge to chase, Gale has something deep inside of him. Like he knows what's up. So each kit came with a boost gauge and a pyrometer. We'd never seen a pyrometer. Like, what is this? It's a heat gauge. It tells you how hot the exhaust is, which tells you in English, how fast can I push this engine? How hard can I push it? So this kit was a great success. And it was amazing to me. I thought, okay, we'll sell some of these, I didn't think we'd sell thousands and thousands and thousands of these to rave reviews. Fast forward, this kit's been out a while. Man, we sold a lot of them and people loved them. One day, this elderly man came in the shop and he goes, yeah, I want to talk to somebody. I bought this kit. It doesn't work. I'm like, it doesn't work? Really? I go, well, where's the truck? Well, it's outside. Oh, well, let's go for a ride. Mm-hmm. So he's driving, and this is a manual 6.2. And we drive out the driveway here, and he goes up the street. So he drives this thing about a mile, and it's like, he's not getting into it. I go, let me drive. So I get this thing out there. First gear is very deep, so, almost does nothing. Second gear, and then I step on it, and he's like, whoa, because now the turbo is coming on. Yeah. So basically, he'd never felt the turbo because he's driving it like a kitten. I go, no, look it. Another thing you need to know, when you go to a higher gear ratio, the engine makes more power and more torque. So I put it in third and step on. He's like, this is unbelievable. And man, that guy left here grinning ear to ear. He just didn't know how to drive it. He didn't know how to put his foot into it and, get it going. So that always stood out in my mind because it's the one time somebody told me like, it doesn't work. I'm like, this can't be right.
We had that with a boat guy one time.
Yeah.
We did turbo kits for MerCruiser V8s in the 70s and into the 80s. Guy buys us a turbo system, puts it on the engine, fires it up in the driveway, calls us. It doesn't make any boost, And it was like, where are you running it? Well, I've got it on the trailer in the driveway. I said, dude, you got to get some load on the engine.
Yeah.
He expected boosted idle,
Well, don't forget, you being at the cutting edge of turbocharging as we know it, people didn't have experience with this. They didn't know what to expect. And I could clearly see how that would happen because he thinks it's like a blower. You just rev it up and go and,
Yeah. When you think about it, there was a guy in Iowa who did a turbo kit for little 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder MerCruiser engines, but nobody doing what we were doing. I mean, it was just fresh.
Yeah, it was amazing to see the evolution of this because you have to remember, back then in the early 80s, no one had even seen a turbocharged car. Like Porsche had done some turbocharging in the 70s, 80s, but we didn't see these cars. Who could afford this car? So we never saw anything like it. Our hot rodding experience was we would get a SIG cam and put some headers on, and there you have it.
Yeah.
So another thing, Gale always found that niche or that thing that just fit the bill. One of which, another thing that I questioned at the time that I don't know about this. People would buy these twin turbo kits and put them in these Trans Ams. And one of the biggest problems was they couldn't tell how fast they were going. So, the car is like pinning the speedometer.
It's a stock speedometer.
Yeah. So after that, Gale came up with this idea. We need a 200 mile an hour speedometer. And I'm thinking, why? Why is this our problem? But nevertheless, he's in drive mode and he decides he's going to build a 200 mile an hour speedometer. So we manufactured these speedometers. They look exactly like a factory speedometer, also certified to 200 miles an hour. And I thought, yeah, we'll probably sell some of these. Well, this thing caught fire. We couldn't make them fast enough. Everybody wanted one, even if they didn't have a fast car. They wanted the 200 mile speedometer.
To show their friends. Yeah. Who knew?
Yeah. I mean, they sold like hotcakes. And people were mad because we couldn't get them. We couldn't make them fast enough. Because again, back in the day, I mean, they had to be silk screened and calibrated. It was a big story to make the speedometer. But again,
we also did an 8,000 RPM tachometer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one more quick story. And Gale's heard this, so I'm not too scared. I call this the day I learned to respect horsepower. I had driven many, many of these very, very high horsepower cars with great success and really no incidents. And it came one day, I had to take a car to a car show. And I don't know where the car show was. It must have been in Anaheim, maybe Anaheim Convention Center. And I took this car at 6 o'clock in the morning with a friend following me in the Tortilla, which was our shop truck.
Yeah, the white Tortilla.
I got on the southbound 605, and there was no cars on the road. And this particular car had an automatic transmission, and it had a B&M slap shifter, which, you would just punch the shifter forward and, it would shift the car. And again, with these turbocharged engines, unlike a naturally aspirated engine, when you shift gears and load the engine harder, it makes more power instead of less. So, I get on the thing first, second, I'm burning rubber in second gear, third gear, which was the last gear in this transmission. It's all good. I'm going about 100 and the car is kind of accelerating really hard. The problem is now I'm coming up on somebody. So there's a car ahead of me on the road. As I approached the back of this car, I took my foot off the throttle. The chassis unloaded, and this car swapped ends like lightning. So I'm going like 100 miles an hour backwards. And I remember looking over my left shoulder with both feet standing on the brake pedal, screeching, here comes the guardrail. I'm like, holy shit, here it comes. And I watched that guardrail approach, and I was like within 1 foot of it. The car stopped. And I was literally shaking. It scared the hell out of me. My buddy pulls up next to me like, what the hell are you doing? He goes, all of a sudden I saw your headlights. I'm like, let's just go. So we went on to the car show. But that was quite an awakening for me because being young and immortal, I had no idea something like this could happen. And let me tell you, I drove those cars with a whole different respect after that. You know, it really blew my mind.
Was it a T-top?
It was a convertible.
There you are.
Yeah, so it was a very twisty car.
Exactly.
So that car was twisted, you know, under power.
Right.
And I'm telling you, it's like you flicked it and it just reversed.
We came up with a whole chassis. Those things there was no body on frame.
Yeah.
So we did a connection front to rear under the floor pan to prevent that with the convertibles. With the T-tops, I got on one myself and it broke the T-top right behind the windshield, and it broke the windshield. It twisted the car that much. So the torque output, woo! So I never did another T-top, but we did some convertibles. The first one we did was a 67 Camaro convertible.
That was a beautiful car.
Chuck, what the hell was his name?
Yeah, I remember the car.
Yeah, guy out of Pasadena. And we had to fix the frame on that one, too. We knew what to do, but I never heard this story.
So when you load the chassis really hard, you know, you're loading like in the clockwise direction, and it's putting a lot of pressure like on the front right corner of the car, and it's basically lifting the left rear. And it's like the car is sprung hard. As soon as you take that power away, that spring lets go, and it flipped the car around. I couldn't have spun it around faster if I wanted to. It was astounding. And what was really weird is it's not like I just lost control. I went exactly backwards, like 180 degrees, going 100 miles an hour backwards, which is probably a good thing. May have been killed otherwise. Mm-hmm. And I may have been killed by Gale if he found out about this.
But now I know, but...
It's too late.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you're doing now, Rick? What are you up to?
Well, I work on commercial radios now. You know, electronics has always been my passion. And I've spent years, I worked for Motorola, fixing radios on the bench and, you know, eventually working in the field. And now...
Didn't you rig police cars at one time?
Oh, yes, built lots of police cars. You know, all the stuff related to communication, police, fire.
Yeah. But you rigged cars.
Oh, yeah.
Like the old Ford...
the Crown Vics, the
Crown
Explorers.
Vics.
Yeah. Built many, many, many of them. And now I, you know, work on pretty just major installations. Like we just did SoFi Stadium, which has a multi-million-dollar radio system that's all encrypted. And it was quite something because it's kind of like a Gale Banks place. It's a really special place. Everything is the top end. You know, this is a $5 billion building. And so to be able to install the radio system in and make it look nice, you know, because antennas and stuff can be ugly, you know, it takes a little finesse and experience to do that.
Yeah.
And it's great fun. I enjoy very much working on the communication stuff. You know, when I started playing with radios and fixing them, they still had tubes. Now, if you look at these modern radio systems, like the one I described at SoFi, it's essentially a giant computer system with switches and routers and this kind of thing, which is kind of amazing to me because, you know, I predate software. So to see the system that is, you know,
so do I.
Yeah.
We both predate software.
No doubt. It's amazing to see that the RF, the radio frequency part of the system is the least of it. It's all the computers and switching and it's quite something. And it's also interesting to, you know, be able to do the police radios and give them the best you can possibly get. But, you know, this line of thinking I learned from you, and that is like how to be professional, how to think like an engineer, and how to get results, you know. And it's fun for me to bring all that experience to what I do now. It's very enjoyable.
So one thing, you also sold over the phone at Banks.
Yes, I did.
He became the best salesman we'd ever had. He was literally on the phone constantly writing orders, so much paper on his desk it looked like a chicken had exploded on his desk, you know. And he'd lose orders. And the guys would call back, oh, what the f*** is going on? Where's my turbos? You know, because what we sell emotion.
Yeah.
You don't need Gale Banks, but you want Gale Banks stuff. So it's just a it's always been basically a masculine business.
Yeah.
And I think at that time, I'm trying to remember, and this was a big deal, a really big deal. Rick did a $400,000 month. Now, when you got a 12-man business, and you got one guy responsible for that sales number, my God, think about how good he was at that.
But, you know, it was easy because it was easy to sell because I saw this product from conception to reality, and it's easy to sell quality. You know, I don't feel like I'm trying to like cheat somebody out of their money. I know when they get it, they're going to love it. It's going to be awesome. So it really sold itself. So I was just happened to be the person that was the front line and taking these orders, and I didn't even break a sweat doing this. You know, it was a pleasure. And, you know, it was also fun to get the feedback, and people call up like, hey man, this is way more than I expected.
Oh, well, I got another Rick story. Rick's always been sparky, as he said. We had these 6-button phones, and one of the buttons was a PA system. Hey, so-and-so, call on 3. So Rick figures out how to get 5 individuals. He just go in the phone book, yes. And he found 5 guys named Chan, and he starts calling them. It's all linked together.
Yeah, I found that I took the telephone apart and I could there were mechanical push buttons. Like when you push one button, the other one pops up. I'm like, well, I'm not having that. So I took the phone apart and made it so I could push down multiple lines together. And remember, people had never even heard of conference calling or anything.
But he did it. So the first guy, hello? You know, the next guy, hello? Who's this? This is Chan. No, I'm Chan. Can you imagine the argument? When there's 5 Chans on
yeah, they're
there.
like, why are you calling me?
Yeah.
And it's on the PA and everyone's roaring in the shop.
Yeah, he said to the PA, everybody in the shop is falling down laughing. It's just, that was a typical Rick day.
Yes, we always had a comedy angle on
Yes, things. Exactly.
There were some great stunts. So since we're talking about this, one time we were in Ely, Nevada, because we've been out on the salt all day, and we're checking into this casino hotel thing. And so
State Line.
Is that where it was?
Yeah,
okay, that sounds right. So I have a red Suburban, and Gale goes in to check into the hotel, and I see these big sliding doors that enter the casino. And I look at Colin, because Colin knows what's up. He knows me, that something's up. Colin.
So Colin is one of my sons.
Yes, Colin was probably, 12 years old at the time.
Yeah.
I look at him, Colin, don't laugh. I pull up to these sliding doors, they open, and I drive the Suburban into the casino.
Into the lobby.
And Gale he's at the check-in desk.
The headlights are on.
He's at the check-in desk, ahead of us. And I hit the high beams, and it makes like this 18-foot tall shadow of Gale on the wall. And he won't turn around. He knows something. You can hear the diesel engine, So I pull right into the casino, and I'm just sitting there like stone-faced, and the security guard comes running over like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm checking in. I'm trying to park. Well, no, you can't park in here. Oh, well, where am I supposed to? Okay. And I just back out. And that was that. This whole time, there's all this yelling. He won't turn around. It was great. So, we always did stunts and pranks, never anything that harmed anyone. It was just for our own amusement. And, we could probably talk about 100 more of these.
Oh, my God, yes. To your point, there's lots more to talk about. Maybe we give it a couple of months and you come back.
I would enjoy that. And in fact, a lot of this stuff needs to be memorialized. especially from firsthand perspective. And by the way, Jay, when we make the Gale Banks movie, I want to be the consultant.
You're on with that. Jay's here. Our producer is always Jay, a.k.a. Lightning. So, Rick, I got to answer some listener questions, but it's been awesome having you here.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Gale, and I appreciate the time.
You got it.
Propensity for density is what it's all about. You've got to take in lots of air and then you blow it out. It isn't just the CFM, you need the pounds per minute. You don't want to just blow air, you've got to know what's in it. You want to make some power and you don't want to fail. Ask Gale, just ask Gale.
Time to get to your question, guys. The first one is from Poland Ball, and he's asking, what's your opinion of electromechanical valve actuation, aka free valve, and similar technologies? My opinion is it's about damn time. People have talked about this for 30 years. Getting away from a camshaft is huge because lifter acceleration has been a problem. Valve springs are a problem. Valve train deflection is a problem. Valve float is a problem. This is transformative in terms of the way an engine inhales and exhausts. Other than the valve hitting the piston, when the piston is at or about top dead center, you can do whatever you want with valve position. You can open the valve to its full lift instantly. It depends on the electromechanical system. The energizing rate is limited by the heat rejected by the solenoid mechanism. There's electrical energy being consumed here. To me, ultimately, heat dissipation in the actuating system is the limit of the electromechanical valve actuation. And then the rate of lift, ultimately, there's going to be a time for that. So you can't instantly open the valve. But it's damn near do that. So you go to full lift, go through a duration of crank angle, and drop it back to the seat. It's kind of cool. It's the stuff dreams are made of. Working on cam profiles and valve gear limiting speed is something I've done since the 60s. So that cat, Koenigsegg, he's got a dream job that he's got money. His customers have money. He can build supercars one at a time and do these technologies with what he earns there. I have a feeling he might be independently wealthy as well, or come from wealth. But I watch what he's doing. I admire it. Executing a free valve or electromechanical actuation in a production atmosphere, nobody's doing it. I wish somebody would. Make it affordable. So thank you for that question. I enjoyed that question, Poland. Thank you. I just answered Poland's question, but here's a polarizing question from Steve E. Why would you choose a V8 Duramax over an i6 Cummins for drag racing? Well, I've helped develop Duramax performance quite a bit. There was a time when it was all basically Cummins, and I've set records with Cummins, some of which are world-class, high-speed records, and they still stand. Truth be known, I'm a Cummins fan as well. But nobody was doing anything with the Duramax, and I was working on it for military uses, and Marine even did a military boat with Duramaxes, super turbo Duramaxes, probably 15 years ago. And I kind of like the V8 too. It's a shorter engine, easier to package, especially as I get into hybrid. And the rotating inertia is less, so the engine will respond more quickly. And consider this, there's 2 more sets of valves. The bore sizes are basically the same between a 6.7 Cummins and a 6.6 Duramax. but I got 2 more sets of valves in a V8, so I can inhale if the valve diameters or port configuration flow similarly. I've got 33% more breathing with the V8 per revolution. How about that? So there you go. That's hard to deny. I can make more power with the same displacement engine at the same intake manifold air density as you would, the inline 6 is just going to take more air density, more boost, less heat, lots of turbocharging, lots of intercooling, and higher air density, which means more turbine drive pressure to achieve the same horsepower with the V8. It takes more turbo, more intercooler with the 6. I don't care if it's inline or V6 or what it is. I've never heard anybody say that, by the way. It's my decision to do the V8 was guided by that. It's like, hey, this is a hell of an advantage right out of the box. So less inertia, less rotating mass, and 33% more valve, more port, more flow at the same intake manifold air density. Bam. 2 great questions. If you guys have one, go to askgale@bankspower.com. If you like the show, please leave us a review on your Apple Podcast app or on Spotify. It helps us to reach more people. Talk to you soon.